Welcome to the video. Tonight, you're invited to rest your mind and wander quietly into the desert winds of ancient Egypt. Not to admire the glory of golden sarcophagi or the lofty tombs of kings, but to live, for a while, as someone far more forgotten. You will not be pharaoh. You will not be a noble. You are no priest nor royal architect. You are someone they never wrote about except, perhaps, in a faint scrawl on a wall beneath a collapsed shaft. You are a pyramid builder. As you lie back now, the rhythm of your own breathing may begin to slow. Let the quiet weight of the past settle over you like a linen shroud. For the next 2 hours, there will be no glowing screens, no demands, no harsh light, only the patient unfolding of another life, a rougher life, one of dust, discipline, and divine silence. Imagine waking to the sting of sand in your eyes. The scent of sweat and clay fills your nostrils. A copper sun is rising, though you have no real way of measuring time. The Nile is somewhere out there in the distance, but you are not near its breezy banks. You are deep within the stone valley. Here, the pyramids do not shimmer as they do on travel posters. They loom, enormous, gray, unfinished, and always requiring more. They told you this labor would ensure your soul's safe passage to eternity, that each stone moved, each back bent, was part of divine balance. But lately, you wonder, the gods are silent, the heat is not, so ... you press on. Let us begin our journey with segment 1, Miserable Mornings, where we wake as you would have on coarse mats, beneath cold stars, only to rise into the blistering breath of Egypt's dawn. You awake before the sun rises. There is no soft bedding beneath you, only the thin, scratchy mat of woven reeds that presses against your shoulder blades, already stiff from yesterday's labor. You shift, slowly, feeling the familiar grittiness of wind-blown sand that's collected in your bedding overnight. Your fingers find the small stone you keep under the edge of the mat, not for comfort, but for ritual. A smooth pebble, washed in the Nile long ago, now dry and warm. You press it to your palm and breathe. The air is cool, for now, but you know this is temporary. Within an hour, the chill will burn off, replaced by the dry, searing heat that dominates your waking hours. Already, a fine dust floats through the air of the workers' camp, stirred by footsteps and the early morning winds that slink through the alleys like stray dogs. Around you, others begin to stir. The sounds are soft, but layered low groans as limbs stretch, the rustle of mats and cloth, and the quiet coughs of men clearing dust from their throats. Some sleep 3 to a room, others more, depending on the crew and the arrangement of the brick huts. These homes are simple: mud brick walls, flat roofs, and narrow openings to keep out the sand. Some have small altars scratched into the corners, crude offerings left to whatever god might be listening. You rise carefully. Your lower back is stiff, a dull ache that has settled deep into the muscles after weeks, no months of repetition. Beside your mat, your tunic hangs from a peg, already bearing the marks of hard use. Sweat-stained, threadbare at the shoulder, patched twice. You pull it over your head with practiced ease, wincing slightly as the fabric pulls across sunburnt skin. Outside, the sky is pale blue at the edges, growing lighter by the minute. Soon, the overseers will begin their rounds. They do not shout at this hour, not yet. Their presence alone is enough a quiet warning that idleness will not be tolerated. They wear their linen robes, straighter, cleaner, Their voices are clipped and cold. They carry wooden staffs, not for violence at least not always, but for command. You move toward the communal ovens, where a line has already formed. A teenage boy is turning flat cakes over a bed of hot stones, using a broken reed stalk to keep his distance. The bread is coarse, made of emmer and barley, mixed with whatever filler is available, sometimes crushed acacia pods, sometimes ground lentils, and sometimes just more husk than grain. Each cake bears the small grit of groundstone from the communal mill. You chew slowly, not because it's satisfying, but because it stretches the meal. The bread sticks to your teeth. There's no honey today, only a few dried figs passed hand to hand. Someone offers you one. You nod in thanks. Water comes from the jars that stand beside the wall. They were filled before sunrise, brought in from the river by donkey cart in heavy ceramic vessels sealed with mud. You sip sparingly. The liquid is warm already and tastes faintly of clay, but it softens your throat and washes down the dust. A few men murmur greetings. You answer with a nod. Mornings are not for conversation. Everyone is thinking ahead to the date, to the heat, the weight, the repeated motions that will dominate the next 12 hours. A bell made from a broken copper bowl is struck with a stick. Once, twice. The signal is clear. Work begins. You begin the short walk to the site. The path cuts across hard-packed earth, worn smooth by thousands of feet. It passes the granary, the storage sheds, and the scribe's house, where records are kept, wages recorded in grain, tools signed in and out, injuries noted, if not always addressed. You see the line of men ahead. Some carry tools over their shoulders, copper chisels, wooden levers, thick coils of rope. Others are empty-handed. Their job today undecided until the foreman assigns it. Everyone walks the same, slow, resigned, bodies already bracing for the strain to come. As the pyramid comes into view, it does not gleam. The white limestone casing is incomplete. Most of what you see is dull brown koruf blocks stacked in stepped layers. Wooden scaffolding clings to its sides like the ribs of a dying creature. The causeway, which carries blocks from the valley below, is crowded with sleds and ropes. The air smells of sweat, old wood, and faintly of animal fat used to lubricate the sand for dragging. You are assigned to the mid-level hauling team. It is your job to assist in moving a half-carved limestone block from the delivery ramp to its resting place on the southern face. This block weighs as much as several oxen perhaps. Morand, it will take no fewer than 20 men to maneuver it. You are given a lever, a long, curved piece of tamarisk wood, smoothed from use. It fits into the notch at the sled's side. You and 3 others will help rock the sled forward as it is pulled. The chant begins. It is not words, exactly, just sounds long, low syllables that rise and fall in rhythm. Someone starts it, then others join in. It helps with timing, with unity, with forgetting. Ha a h dot dot dot, ha a h dot dot dot, ha. The rope team pulls. You and the others push your levers forward. The sled groans, then shifts a few inches. You hold your breath. If it slips or cracks, there will be consequences. Another pull, another chant. By mid-morning, your arms are numb. Your knees ache from bracing against the stone platform. You wipe sweat from your brow, only to feel dust clinging their course, salty, gritty. You are not permitted a break yet, not until the stone is set in place. You look briefly to the horizon. The Nile is out there, a thin shimmer of silver, so close and yet unreachable for you today. Its breeze does not reach the pyramid site. Only the dry wind comes here, carrying dust from the desert. The sled catches on a raised stone. The chant falters. You and the others push harder. Someone yells. A foreman appears, clicking his staff against the stones. You heave again. The sled moves. The chant resumes. Lunch is still hours away. You are told this work is holy, that each stone laid brings the pharaoh closer to the stars, that your labor pleases the gods. But the gods do not speak, and Pharaoh is a shape in the distance, never seen. His likeness appears on the temple walls, serene and eternal, but you have never stood near him, only near the likenesses of his servants, priests and scribes, whose robes are clean, whose voices command. You see the priest sometimes, near the base of the pyramid. He walks with the confidence of someone whose feet never blister. He sprinkles natron over sacred tools and recites protective spells. You wonder what protection he offers for you. You do not pray in public, not here, but in the privacy of your mat. Before sleep, you speak to the gods of your ancestors, small local gods, with names forgotten by the kingdom's scribes. You whisper to them for rest, for safety, for strength. And yet, each morning, you awake feeling the same. Dust in your nose, cramps in your legs. The weight of the sun bearing down, though it hasn't yet risen. Your life has narrowed to cycles: eat, haul, rest, repeat. But within that cycle is something ancient, something deeply rooted. The stones will outlast you. The pyramid will stand long after your bones have returned to sand. This, they say, is your immortality. But you do not feel immortal, only tired. The sun climbs higher. The heat sharpens. Someone is singing again, not a chant, but a melody. Soft, old, carried over from childhood. You hum along. There is dust on your lips, but you don't bother brushing it off. The day has only just begun. The sun is now fully overhead, and the light cuts down with an intensity that seems to bleach color from the world. The limestone around you no longer looks pale yellow or soft gray, but instead glows with a flat, blinding whiteness that bounces heat back into your face. Every surface you touch is warm, and some are nearly hot enough to burn. Your tunic clings to your back, saturated with sweat, the fabric rough from repeated washings in sand-silted water. You've stopped noticing the smell of your own body, or that of the men around you. Everyone smells of sun and dust and labor. If there is perfume in this world, it is the occasional sweetness of roasted onions or dried dates eaten in quiet moments, under thin shade, rare, short moments, like breaths caught between heavy sighs. You've spent the last hour tamping gravel onto the ramp. It's repetitive work, but vital. The massive hauling causeway that snakes up toward the growing pyramid must be kept solid. Its surface packed hard and true. Its incline just gradual enough to allow the transport of multi-ton stones without toppling sleds. You and the others spread broken shards of rock and coarse sand over weak points, smashing them down with wooden mallets worn smooth from thousands of hands. The tools thud rhythmically, like distant drums, one of the few reliable beats in a life without clocks. Your arms are sore, but your thoughts drift as you swing the mallet again and again. The vibration in your wrist becomes familiar, almost grounding. It connects you to this place, to this moment, to this century, and to the lives of the countless other men doing the same thing up and down the slope. When the call comes for a shift in duty, it's not a bell or a horn, but a man's voice, low and commanding, speaking a phrase that all recognize without needing to listen carefully. You follow the others toward the new staging area where a half-cut block sits waiting to be moved. A small team has brought it from the edge of the quarry down below, using ropes, sleds, and perhaps divine luck. You've heard tales of ropes, snapping stones, rolling, crushing, flattening. These are not shouted stories. They are told in hushed tones during evening meals, passed between mouthfuls of coarse bread and lukewarm beer made from millet. Sometimes a man simply does not return to camp, and no one asks. The sled itself is massive, thick, wood-braced with strips of copper, lashed together with rope. The limestone block atop it is not even close to polished. It's roughly squared, its edges still bearing the bite marks of copper chisels. The man in charge of the team gestures toward you and others in your group. It's time to move the sled up the ramp. The crew organizes quickly, almost automatically. Some take ropes, thick cords wrapped around their shoulders. Others, including you, take levers. The long poles are shaped to fit the curves of the sled's underside, made from tamarisk or acacia, splintered but serviceable. Each man places his shoulder against the lever, waiting for the signal. The chant begins, not a song exactly, but a low, repetitive syllable that keeps time and breath aligned. Ha, ha, dot, 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 ha. It begins in the chest, rising from deep within, shared between dozens of voices. It pulls your muscles into rhythm, sinks your legs to the task, dulls the edge of the strain. The sled moves in short bursts. With each chant, the ropes tighten, the levers press, and the block inches forward. The groan of wood and stone mingles with the voices. The track beneath the sled has been lubricated with water and animal fat to reduce friction. The smell of tallow is thick, earthy, and sharp. Your hands grip the lever. The rough grain of the wood is hot to the touch. The sun glares against the pale block, making it hard to see, but your feet know the steps. Push, reset, brace again. A pause for breath, then the chant resumes. One man falters. His foot slips on the slickened sand. He nearly falls, but another catches him, steadying his weight with a grunt. No one stops, no one scolds. The rhythm must continue. You adjust your stance, dig your heels into the packed earth, and strain again. The sled jerks forward, then settles. You can feel the weight of centuries in your shoulders, the promise of eternity that rests in this silent, immovable stone. Eventually, the foreman calls a stop. The block is not yet placed, but it's reached the next staging point. You pull back from the sled, wipe your forehead with the edge of your tunic, and glance at your palms. The skin is cracked, the calluses hard like bark. You flex your fingers and breathe in deeply. Dust enters your lungs. It always does. A few men drink from a shared jar of water. You wait your turn. The jar is warm, the water faintly salty. It's enough. You return to the ramp to repair another section that's eroded. The wind has picked up, loosening the top layer of fill and scattering it across the slope. You crouch low and begin scooping sand and rock into a new basket. The movement is familiar, soothing even. The basket creaks as it fills. You sling it onto your shoulder and walk the short distance to the repair site, where others are pressing stones into place, trying to make them level. You dump the contents and return for more. The routine stretches out, hour after hour, until the sun begins to dip slightly in the sky, casting long shadows across the worksite. The pyramid's silhouette grows jagged, its stepped form harsh against the amber light. You try not to look at it directly. The immensity of it unsettles you. From far away, they say it looks like perfection. From here, it is a mountain of struggle, mistakes, and men who've vanished beneath its mass. A short break comes mid-afternoon. You sit in the lee of a scaffolding post, the wooden supports rising behind you like the ribs of some skeletal beast. The breeze is stronger here. It carries sand into your eyes, but at least it moves. You close one eye, then the other, breathing deeply. The scent of dust has layers crushed limestone, dried sweat, faintly the remnants of cedar resin once used on tool handles. You lean back, stretching out your legs, rolling your shoulders. Your spine cracks. One of the younger men beside you mutters a curse about the sun. You give a half smile. Complaints are a luxury. So is laughter. After the pause, work resumes again. A new stone must be aligned. This time, you assist in guiding its placement. The foreman watches closely, eyeing the gap it must settle into. There's very little room for error. The men maneuver the sled. You use a wooden rod to judge spacing. When the block slides into position with a muted crunch of stone on stone, there's a pause, then a soft exhale from the crew. The foreman gives a curt nod. That's as close as you get to praise. Evening approaches. The shadows stretch longer, cooler air crawling in from the direction of the river. The bell rings a final time today. It does not signal rest, but transition. You carry your tools to the storage shed. A scribe waits there with a wax tablet. He marks your cruise number, checks the returned levers, then steps aside. He does not look at you. You walk back toward the workers' village, legs heavy. The path down the ridge is worn smooth by foot traffic. You pass men in quiet groups, some talking softly, others simply walking. A few women wait near the edge of the settlement, bearing water jars and baskets of dried bread. Some of the men have family here wives or sisters who cook in communal ovens, who patch tunics, who raise children in the shade of the mud brick walls. You live alone in your hut. It's better, maybe. Fewer distractions, less to lose. Inside your room, the light is dim. You pull off your tunic and hang it on a peg. Your skin is marked with the day's work dirt streaks along your arms. A small scrape across your hip, dried blood under one nail. You wash with a rag dipped in a clay bowl of water, just enough to remove the outer layer of grit, the deeper grime, the kind that settles into joints and fingernail stays. It always does. Dinner is flatbread and a small scoop of beans, cooked earlier and cooled now to the temperature of the evening air. You eat slowly, savoring the bland taste. There is no meat, not today. That is, for feast days, or priests, or offerings. You finish the meal and sit on your mat, legs crossed, back against the wall. The room is quiet. Outside, someone sings an old hymn, something about the journey of Ra through the night sky. The voice is low, tired, but still melodic. You close your eyes and listen. The candle burns low. You stare at its flame for a while, watching it flicker in the draft from the doorway. Shadows dance across the wall. You think, briefly, of the gods, the ones worshipped in gold temples and carved into sacred walls. You wonder if they see this place, if they look down and watch men like you lifting stones in their name. Lying back on the mat, you tuck your hands behind your head. The sky outside your doorway is dark now, pinpricked with stars. You cannot see them from where you lie, but you know they're there and moving, eternal, like the pyramid, like the sun. Sleep takes you slowly. Your body relaxes in stages, shoulders first, then hips, then legs. Your fingers twitch once, then go still. In the final moment before true rest, you wonder if tomorrow will be different, but it won't. It will be morning, it will be dust, it will be stone, and you will rise again. There is a difference between a hard morning and a long day. A hard morning aches in your arms. A long day numbs your mind. And here, under the unyielding Egyptian sun, one always becomes the other. It is not just that the hours stretch, they seem to loop, to fold back on themselves, each one indistinguishable from the last. You wake, you work, and you return to sleep with dust in your ears and the same stiffness in your legs. The pyramid grows slowly, endlessly, as if it too is stuck in time, and you, one small man among hundreds, are bound to its rhythm. Today, you are on hauling duty from first bell. No tamping, no stone setting, just pure brute movement. You begin at the base of the quarry ramp, where the heavy blocks wait like silent beasts. Their surfaces are dull, scored with tool marks, their corners crumbling with age and mishandling. Each is fitted to a wooden sled, lashed tightly with thick rope, and mounted atop a crude rolling platform. The sled itself will not roll. Instead, it will be dragged over sand, up slopes, along causeways. You and the others will provide the force. The rock provides the resistance. The ropes are laid out in long, coiled lines. You take your place, shoulders set, hands curled around the rough hemp. You are one of 40 men assigned to this particular block. At the front, to overseers bark instructions. Their commands are short and clipped. They know this system well. You can tell by their tone they have spoken these same words every day for years. At the signal, you pull. Your heels dig into the ground. Your arms strain. The rope cuts into your palms. The sled groans, but does not move. Another command, another heave. The chant begins again. Ho, ... ho ho, ... double quotes, low and steady. A song of momentum. This time, the sled lurches forward. It slides across the packed earth with a squeal of wood against stone. The movement is barely visible, but you feel it in your bones. You keep pulling, pace matched to the chant. There is no shade on the hauling path. The sun climbs quickly, casting down light that has no color, only heat. Your skin prickles beneath your tunic, and your back is slick with sweat. The soles of your feet are sore, even through your sandals. Small rocks embed themselves into the cracked leather. You ignore the discomfort. You must. There is no room for complaint. The path bends slightly, rising up a man-made ramp, reinforced with gravel and rubble. You have helped build this ramp in past weeks. You know its angles, you know its weak points, and still, each step requires caution. The sled could tip, the block could shift, the rope could snap. Midway up the ramp, a man in the crew behind you loses his footing. The sled shudders. Someone shouts. The line halts abruptly. You stumble forward and catch yourself. The overseer's staff strikes the ground beside the fallen man. Not on him yet. The message is clear. He scrambles back into position, breath ragged. The chant resumes. You begin again. By the time the block reaches the platform staging area, your muscles are trembling. Your arms feel detached from your body, heavy and unresponsive. You release the rope, slowly, fingers uncoiling as though waking from sleep. Blood rushes back into your hands. Your nails are lined with grit. The skin on your palms is raw. There is no break. Another sled waits. Another block needs moving. You are allowed a swallow of water, nothing more. The jars are rationed. The scribe who records your hours has a wax tablet, his stylus moving in sharp strokes as he tracks who is present, who is late, who is too slow. Everything here is watched, not with kindness, but with order. Order is sacred. Order builds pyramids. The next block is smaller. Only 20 men are assigned. You are among them. The chant begins again. This time, the rhythm comes easier. Your muscles know the motion. Your feet anticipate the drag. You fall into a strange, calm, not peace, but absence. The act of hauling becomes a pattern. Your mind floats above your body, observing without feeling. You become your task. As midday approaches, the path becomes slick with grease and sand. To ease the drag, water is poured along the track, and animal fat smeared onto key contact points. It smells foul, but it works. The sled glides more easily, and you find yourself grateful for the slickness, even as it coats your feet and causes your grip to falter. Then something goes wrong. A warning cry rings out from ahead. The sled ahead of yours, an older block, larger, less stable, has shifted sideways. The front rope has snapped. Men scatter. One jumps clear just as the sled tilts and collapses into the side of the ramp. Dust explodes upward. Shouting fills the air. You drop your rope instinctively and run forward to help stabilize the situation. The overseers shout orders. A man's leg is trapped beneath the edge of the broken sled. He's conscious, breathing hard, teeth clenched. Blood pools beneath him, darkening the sand. There is no time for ceremony. The others lift. The block shifts. The man is dragged out, his leg twisted, already swelling. He will not walk today, perhaps not again. You stand still, chest heaving, heart pounding. Dust coats your face, clinging to the sweat. The scribe arrives, eyes narrow. He writes something down. There is no question of stopping. The path must be cleared. The work must go on. You return to your sled. The chant resumes. Hours pass. The sun drifts lower in the sky. The heat does not fade, only settles differently, more horizontal, more deceptive. You complete 3 more hauls before the final bell. Your shirt is soaked through, your muscles buzzing with exhaustion. The path back to camp feels twice as long as usual. Inside the camp, you stop by the communal basin. It's little more than a clay-lined pit filled with cloudy water, but it's enough to rinse your hands. You do not remove your tunic. There is no point. The dust has fused with the fabric. It will remain there until your next rest day, when you might have time to scrub it in the river. You pass the infirmary. It's not truly a building, just a shaded area with mats, jars of resin, herbs, and a few weary attendants. The man from earlier is there. His leg has been wrapped in linen, soaked with palm wine. He is asleep. His face is pale. Dinner is quiet. Bread and lentils, again with a smear of sour goat cheese. You eat quickly. Your mouth is dry. You chew without tasting. A boy plays a reed flute near the edge of the camp, the notes thin and wandering like smoke. The sound drifts over you. You close your eyes and lean against the wall of your hut. When you finally lie down, the mat feels both too hard and too familiar. Your body cannot decide whether to relax or remain tense. Every muscle hums. You stare at the ceiling, counting the flickering shadows from your candle. The pyramid, you know, will be waiting tomorrow, unmoved, untouched by your suffering. It is not cruel, it is simply indifferent. Sleep does not come easily tonight. Your legs ache too much, but your mind, strangely, is calm. You did not fail today, you did not fall. You are still here for now. The dawn is barely a whisper as you rise again, the coolness of the night still clinging faintly to the air. Your body protests, joints stiff, muscles aching from yesterday's unyielding labor. But the routine presses on like the relentless sun. There is no time for pain, no time for hesitation. The pyramid is patient, indifferent, waiting for every block to be hauled, every passage to be cleared, every failure to be overcome with silent endurance. The sun will climb, the stone will weigh heavy, and you will rise again with it. You dress in the half-light, tugging your worn tunic close against the dust and chill, securing your sandals with practiced motions that have become as automatic as breathing. Outside, the camp is stirring to life. Figures move quietly among tents and fires, carrying bundles of reeds or pots of thick porridge. The faint smell of smoked fish mingles with the earthiness of dried dung fires and crushed limestone dust that blankets the whole settlement. The ground crunches beneath your feet as you make your way toward the entrance of the tunnels, the gravel crunching with the weight of feet burdened by fatigue. The tunnel entrance yawns before you like the mouth of some ancient beast, dark and forbidding, its rough limestone walls carved by hands, now long gone. The rough timbers bracing the opening creak faintly as a breeze stirs. You descend carefully, ducking beneath the low lintels and into the murky glow of flickering oil lamps set on stakes, their flames casting shadows that dance eerily along the cramped walls. The air is heavy, here stale, and thick with the scent of dust, damp stone, and the faint, acrid temps of lamp oil. Each breath is a cautious act as the fine grit settles deep into your lungs, coating your throat with a dry scratch that will linger long after you leave this place. Your hands, rough and cracked from years of toil, grasp a basket used to ferry debris. The task today is grueling but necessary, clearing a newly discovered pocket of collapse deeper within the tunnel system. With slow, deliberate movements, you scrape the loose stone chips and crumbled earth into your basket. The gritty load is heavy, the edges sharp enough to draw fresh cuts into your palms despite the cloth wraps you have fashioned. Each movement raises a cloud of dust that hangs in the stagnant air like a thin veil. The baskets move along a human chain, passed from hand to hand by men whose faces are set in expressionless concentration. The muffled shuffles and soft grunts are the only sounds aside from the occasional scrape of stone and the whisper of shifting timbers overhead. The tunnel walls are close, rough against your skin. You can feel the cold limestones chill seeping into your bones, a sharp contrast to the sweat slicking your brow and back. Above, the wooden supports creak ominously. The foreman's voice breaks the silence, low but firm, calling for more wedges here, a brace there. His experience is clear. He knows that one mistake could mean disaster, and yet the work must continue. You remind yourself not to look upward for too long, fearful of what the shadows might conceal. Time becomes fluid, measured only by the slow filling of baskets and the gradual clearing of the collapsed passage. Your fingers sting from the rough stone, your throat parched despite sips of water passed in a shared jar wrapped in cloth. The liquid is cool, but tastes faintly of the dust that permeates everything here. Your eyes begin to water, blurring the dim light. The men around you breathe shallow and steady, eyes fixed ahead or downward, minds lost in the monotony of their task. In one moment of brief respite, your hand brushes a shard of pottery half buried in the rubble. Its painted surface is chipped and faded, colors muted, but still visible beneath layers of dust. You hold it briefly, tracing the worn lines with a fingertip. These fragments speak silently of lives long past of craftsmen and laborers like yourself, of rituals and beliefs now buried under the growing mass of the pyramid. You wonder if they too labored under the weight of stone and sun, if they too hoped their efforts would echo beyond their years. Suddenly, a low groan vibrates through the tunnel. The wooden supports creak louder, and a fine rain of dust drifts down from the ceiling. Every man freezes, time stretches. The silence is heavy with fear, though none speak it aloud. The foreman's voice cuts through the tension. Hold steady, brace the beams, steady hands. You grip your tools tighter, knuckles white, heart pounding against your ribs like a trapped bird. Minutes passionless, agonizing, and then the pressure eases. The collapse holds, at least for now. A collective breath is released, soft murmurs of relief whispered into the stale air. But the tension lingers, threading through every movement, every breath. The work continues. You wedge fresh timbers into place, hammering copper nails into the rough wood, securing braces that will hold this fragile passage until the pyramid's stone can settle into permanence. Your hands are blistered, your muscles trembling with exhaustion, but there is no other choice. To stop is to invite the wrath of the stone, the slow crushing weight of failure. At last, the collapse is cleared and braced. You and your crew crawl backward through the tunnel, emerging, blinking into the harsh sunlight. The brightness stings your eyes, and you close them briefly, letting the warmth soak into your skin like a balm. Back at the hauling yard, more blocks wait, massive stones carved from the distant quarries, rough and unyielding. You join the rope crew again. The chant begins low and steady, a heartbeat that binds you to the task and to the others. Ho, 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 double quotes, the sled grates against the ground, then shifts. Your muscles scream in protest, but your hands hold fast. The path is slick with water and animal fat, making footing treacherous. Your feet slip, sandals scraping against the gravel, but you recover. A whip cracks sharply above the dinner warning from the overseer, sharp and uncompromising. You pull harder. The rope bites into your palms. Sweat streams into your eyes, blurring your vision. The stone inches forward, slowly but relentlessly. Hours pass in this relentless rhythm stone. Sweat, chant. The sun arcs overhead, relentless and merciless. The dust settles on your skin, mingling with sweat to form a gritty paste that dries and flakes with every movement. You breathe through the dryness in your throat, taste the dust on your tongue. At last, the final bell rings, a sharp, echoing note that signals the end of labor. Your body is spent. Your hands tremble as you release the rope, fingers numb and swollen. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked through with sweat and dirt. You limp back to camp, legs heavy, feet raw. The evening air cools, but does not soothe the ache that runs through your bones. You wash quickly, the water coarse and cold, scrubbing away the grime but not the fatigue. Dinner is meager hard bread, boiled lentils, a small cup of sour beer. The taste is bland, but sustains you. Night descends with a quiet hush. Fires flicker, casting dancing shadows across the camp. A child's lullaby drifts softly on the breeza, plaintive melody in a language older than memory. You lie on your mat, muscles taut and sore, eyes fixed on the darkness above. Sleep comes slowly, heavy and deep, pulling you beneath its calm waves. And when you awake, the sun will rise again. The pyramid will wait, patient and unyielding, and you will rise with it again and again and again, carrying stone and hope in equal measure. The day begins as any other, yet beneath its familiar rhythm lurks a quiet tension that presses on your chest, like the weight of the stones you move each day. Imagine yourself awakening in the thin morning light filtering through the woven reeds of your shelter, your body heavy and aching from endless toil, yet your mind alert with the faintest whisper of unease. Around you, the camp stirs to life with soft murmurs, the shuffling of feet over dusty ground and the clatter of tools being gathered. The usual scents swirl in the air, the sharp tang of burnt red fires, the faint saltiness of dried fish, and the ever-present dust that settles on every surface like a gray shroud. Your brother, your constant companion through these endless days of labor, stirs beside you. His face is lined with fatigue, but marked by a resolute calm, a silent vow to endure what must be endured. Together you rise, don your simple tunics, and step out into the cool morning air that still carries a hint of night's chill, preparing for the work ahead. The pyramid looms above the camp, its massive stone face catching the pale light as the sun inches higher. Its half-formed steps and unfinished edges cast long, sharp shadows that seem to stretch like silent sentinels over every hut, every man and woman whose lives are bound to its creation. You walk alongside your brother through the narrow paths etched between tents and workspaces, the ground beneath your sandals uneven and gritty. The conversations around you are muted, eyes averted as the weight of expectation settles like dust. Today, the overseers have ordered urgent work in one of the side tunnel's passageways that snake beneath the pyramid's base, carved from solid limestone, but fragile after centuries, precarious and prone to collapse. The task is dangerous, the risks high, and the consequences of failure severe, yet there is no choice. The pyramid must rise. You reach the entrance to the tunnel, dark maw, braced with heavy timbers and ropes stretched taut. The smell of damp stone and stale air wafts out, carrying with it a heaviness that seeps into your bones. As you and your brother duck beneath the lintels, the light fades to a dim orange glow cast by flickering oil lamps perched on stakes along the corridor. The air inside is thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning flax wicks. Your breath is cautious, shallow, as you breathe through your mouth to avoid inhaling the choking grit that lingers like a ghost. The walls press close on either side, rough and cold, and the ceiling looms just above your head, held in place by the wooden braces you and your fellow workers have installed over many weeks. Every inch of this underground labyrinth feels alive with tension, as if the very stone itself watches and waits. The work begins without ceremony. You crouch low, grasping your basket and scraping away loose rubble and fallen fragments of limestone that litter the floor. Your fingers sting from the jagged edges, raw from the relentless friction. Your brother works beside you, steady and precise, setting fresh wedges and hammering copper nails into the splintered timbers that brace the ceiling. The rhythm of your labor is slow, but unyielding, a carefully measured dance of stone, wood, sweat, and effort. The baskets pass hand to hand, the weight of the debris shifting as it moves toward the tunnel's mouth, while your eyes remain fixed on the uncertain shadows ahead. The dust rises in fine clouds, coating your skin and clothes, settling deep into your lungs with each breath. The air is heavy and stale, pressing down on you as if the pyramid itself resists your presence. Minutes stretch into hours as you labor beneath the surface, muscles straining and joints aching. The timbers creak ominously overhead, their fragile hold tested by the shifting earth and weight of stone. The foreman's voice cuts through the quiet, low, urgent commands to tighten a brace here, to hammer more wedges there. You follow his instructions with a mix of precision and desperation, aware that any misstep could spell disaster. Your brother glances your way briefly, his eyes meeting yours, a flicker of reassurance passing between you. For a moment, hope flickers. Then the sound comes sharp, sudden crack that echoes through the tunnel like a thunderclap in the still air. The ceiling trembles violently, dust cascading in choking clouds. Your heart hammers as a heavy beam above you splinters with a sickening snap. Time slows to a crawl. You shout a warning, voice raw and desperate, but the collapse is already underway. Stone and timber rain down with crushing force, the roar of falling rock engulfing all else. You throw yourself sideways, arms raised in instinctive defense, the impact knocking the breath from your lungs. Darkness swallows you. The world is reduced to a chaos of dust, crushing weight, and muffled cries. You struggle, pinned beneath the rubble, limbs aching and trapped. Your mind races, desperate for your brother's voice, his presence, but he is gone. The tunnel has claimed him. Hours pass like a cruel eternity. The dust settles. When the overseers finally reach you and pry you free from the wreckage, your body is bruised and battered, but it is the hollow ache inside that consumes you. You search the faces of your comrades for news, but the word has already spread through the camp like wildfire. Your brother did not survive. Grief is a heavy companion, but worse still is the cold finger of blame pointed at you. The overseers gather in grim council, their eyes narrow, voices low but sharp with accusation. The collapse was not fate or misfortune, it was your fault. You failed to secure the brace properly, they say. Your mistake cost a man his life. You are found guilty, not just in the eyes of the overseers, but in the whispered judgments of every laborer and scribe who learns of the tragedy. You stand before them, stripped of dignity and duty. The verdict is pronounced with measured finality. You are no longer fit to work in the sacred task of building eternity. Your hands, once instruments of creation, are now seen as instruments of destruction. The rhythm of the camp shifts around you, once a shared burden, now a solitary weight. The eyes of your fellow workers avoid yours, their silence louder than words. Whispers trail you wherever you go, shadows of blame that cling like dust. In the nights that follow, sleep eludes you. Your mind replays the collapse, the stone falling, your brother's absence, the pyramid's endless stone weights, cold and unmoving, indifferent to your loss. You lie awake, muscles taut and sore, heart heavy with guilt and sorrow. The camp settles into silence, save for distant voices softened by the darkness and the faint crackle of dying fires. Somewhere, a lone voice hums a soft chanta lullaby meant to soothe restless souls, to summon calm from chaos. You close your eyes, imagining your brother's spirit wandering these tunnels, watching the endless work forever bound to the stone and shadows. You breathe deeply, seeking solace in the steady rhythm of the camp's distant chorus, knowing that dawn will come again. The sun will rise, the the pyramid will stand, and you must find a way to rise, with it bearing the weight of your past and the hope of what is yet to be built. The morning sun rises slowly above the horizon, casting its muted light over the sprawling pyramid camp that now feels less like a community and more like a place divided, fractured by grief and accusation. You awaken with a deep ache settling into your chest, weight heavier than the stones you once carried where sorrow and guilt intertwine. The air around you is dry and thick with dust, the scent of burnt reed fires mingling with the lingering odor of sweat and earth, so familiar that it clings to your skin like a second layer. As you push yourself upright, your muscles protest in every fiber, reminders of days spent in endless toil. But today, they ache not only from work, but from the invisible wounds of loss. Your brother's absence is a constant, aching void that shadows every movement, every breath. You rise slowly, the thin fabric of your worn tunic rough against your skin, as you step outside into the crisp morning air, where the desert sun filters weakly through a pale sky. Around you, the camp stirs quietly, but the usual low murmurs of camaraderie and shared hardship are subdued, tempered by the heavy weight of tragedy. Faces turn away when you meet their eyes, conversations pause and then falter. The invisible lines of judgment and suspicion have drawn new boundaries between you and those who once shared your labor and burdens. You move deliberately through the camp, feeling the gaze of others lingering on you like dust particles caught in sunlight, weightless yet unavoidable. You hear whispers carried on the dry wind, voices lowered but sharp with accusation. It was his fault. He didn't brace it properly. The collapse was no accident. These murmurs twist through the alleys between tents like a creeping shadow, wrapping around your shoulders, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. The overseers have pronounced their verdict, and the judgment is absolute. You are guilty not only of negligence, but of the death of your brother, a man who labored side by side with you beneath the unforgiving sun. The weight of this condemnation presses down harder than the heaviest block hauled from the quarry, heavier than any load you have borne. You feel the sting of it in every glance, in every whisper, in the cold distance that has replaced the warmth of fellowship. Eventually, you are summoned to the small enclosure near the pyramid's base, where the foremen hold their court. The air inside the hut is thick with the smell of ink, papyrus, and stale sweat. The only illumination coming from the flickering flame of an oil lamp. The scribe sits hunched over his table, fingers stained with ink, as he records the proceedings with quiet precision. The foreman's voice is measured but unyielding as he delivers the sentence that will alter your life. You are stripped of your labor duties, reassigned to the camp's outskirts, to menial tasks that require little strength or skill. The hands that once lifted stone blocks with tireless persistence will now fetch water, mend worn tools, and tend fire's tasks, far removed from the sacred work of building the Pharaoh's eternal resting place. Your punishment is not only physical, but symbolic, a fall from grace in the eyes of the camp and gods alike. The verdict is carried with a cold finality, devoid of anger, but filled with an unrelenting certainty. You have failed the sacred duty entrusted to you, and now you are cast aside. As you return to your new post on the fringes of the camp, a strange and isolating silence surrounds you. The community that once shared your daily struggles has fractured, leaving you adrift and alone. Men you once called brothers avert their eyes, their greetings reduced to mere nods or silence. The tents and shelters seem to close around you. The laughter and chatter that once filled the air now distant echoes. You find yourself sinking into a shadowed existence, your movements automatic, your thoughts wandering ceaselessly back to the moment of collapse, the sickening crack of timber, the roar of falling stone, the suffocating clouds of dust, and most of all, the absence where your brother once stood. His face, once so familiar and steady, now haunts every corner of your memory like a ghost refusing rest. Night is the cruelest companion. Beneath the vast dome of stars scattered across the desert sky, sleep eludes you as your mind churns with grief and regret. You lie awake on the rough mat, muscles tense and sore, heart pounding against your ribs like a caged bird. The silence of the camp is broken only by the faint crackling of distant fires and the occasional soft murmur of a lullaby sung by a child. A haunting melody in a tongue older than time. You imagine the tunnels beneath the pyramid, dark and silent, where your brother now rests beneath the cold weight of stone and earth. The thought is both a comfort and a torment. He is gone, yet part of the eternal monument, forever entwined with the pyramid's vast shadow. Despite your exile from the core work, the pyramid's construction grinds on relentlessly. From your distant vantage point, you watch the other crews shoulder the burden you once carried. Their steady chants echo across the camp, a rhythmic pulse that binds them together in a shared purpose. The clatter of chisels striking stone rings, sharp and clear, a harsh but constant melody underscoring the vast, ceaseless task. Each massive block hauled, each carefully carved passage formed, tells a story of sacrifice and persistence. Pride and sorrow mingle in your chest as you witness their labor, pride for their endurance, sorrow for your absence, and envy for the role you once played. You find yourself torn between the desire to join them and the crushing weight of your own punishment and guilt. Yet, amid the heavy atmosphere, faint signs of quiet rebellion and humanity persist. You notice subtle markings etched into the walls of nearby tombs, simple scratches and symbols, sometimes hidden in plain sight, hints of resistance whispered beneath the ever-watchful eyes of the overseers. You hear muted conversations between workers, small acts of defiance and solidarity that offer glimmers of hope and resilience. These fleeting moments remind you that beneath the crushing burden of the pyramid, beneath the layers of stone and sorrow, life endures. The spirit of those who build in silence is not easily broken. As the sun dips low, casting the camp in long purple shadows, you sit near the flickering fires, the orange glow reflecting in your tired eyes. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of dry wood and earth. Somewhere in the distance, a voice lifts in song, a simple lullaby that winds its way through the night air. Its melody is haunting and sweet, an ancient thread connecting past to present, sorrow to hope. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, letting the warmth of the fire and the gentle rhythm of the song draw you toward rest. The pyramid looms above, eternal and unmoving, a silent witness to the countless lives it has shaped and consumed. Under its vast shadow, you find a fragile strength, will to endure, to bear the weight of loss, and to carry on through the endless days that stretch ahead. The early morning light creeps slowly over the horizon, casting a pale, diffused glow across the sprawling pyramid camp. A dry breeze stirs the dust and limestone powder that blankets the earth, carrying the faint but unmistakable scent of crushed stone and baked soil, a smell that has become an indelible part of your existence here. You awaken beneath your worn canopy with a heavy heart and aching body, the fatigue of endless toil settling deep into your muscles, but heavier still is the burden of your fate. The overseer's decree reverberates in your mind, cold and absolute. You have been stripped of your duties, condemned to the lime pit, and denied the sacred burial rites that once promised safe passage beyond life. As you move through the camp, the change is palpable. Once familiar faces now avoid your gaze. Whispers trail behind you like drifting dust clouds, and the subtle shift in atmosphere weighs heavily on your spirit. The grief for your brother, taken too soon beneath the crumbling stones, is sharpened by the silent accusations etched into the eyes of those around you. No longer part of the communal rhythm of builders and laborers, you find yourself cast aside, isolated by blame and suspicion, a man marked by misfortune and the heavy hand of judgment. The very ground beneath your feet feels different, a threshold crossed into a harsher reality where belonging and honor have slipped beyond reach. The road to the lime pit stretches ahead like a cruel promise, a barren landscape of cracked, pale earth where the sun's glare is unrelenting and the dust is finer than powdered bones. The air here tastes sharp and bitter, a constant reminder of the caustic nature of your new existence. You step into this forsaken place with a hollow ache, your skin prickling under the sun's fierce heat and the abrasive touch of lime dust that settles everywhere. Around you, others share this exilement, cast out for failures, accidents, or fate's cruel twists, faces drawn tight with exhaustion and acceptance of a sentence worse than the labor itself. Overseers stand watch with unyielding eyes, their voices harsh as they direct the grueling work that awaits in this desolate pit. Labor here is a relentless cycle of strain and endurance. You find yourself stirring heaps of chalky lime, the dust rising like spectral clouds that cling stubbornly to your skin, fill your lungs, and blur your vision. The sun's unceasing blaze turns each day into an ordeal of heat and dust, and every breath draws a sting deep into your throat. Your hands, once skilled in shaping monuments meant to last for eternity, now bear the marks of harsh punishment, calloused, scraped, and worn by unending toil. Each movement sends plumes of white powder swirling, settling on your clothes and face like a shroud, erasing traces of the man you once were beneath this mantle of dust and exile. Nightfall offers little reprieve. Beneath a vast dome of stars, the desert air cools only slightly, but carries the heavy scent of dried earth and smoldering fire. You retreat to the meager shelter at the pit's edge, where quiet murmurs of shared suffering ripple through the group of exiles clustered in shadow. Faces etched with the lines of pain, regret, and muted resilience turn towards you, and in the rare exchanges of words, there is a faint glimmer of solidarity. Yet even in these moments, the denial of burial rites weighs heavily, prayers unsaid, offerings withheld, a future uncertain and dim. The absence of sacred passage cuts deep into your soul, a wound invisible, yet ever present, reminding you of your separation from the living and the dead. Your brother's burial was a sacred event, marked by solemn chants from priests clad in flowing linens, hands raised in blessing, voices carrying prayers through the hot desert air. Offerings of bread, beer, and amulets carved in the likeness of scarabs and solar boats were laid beside hymn symbols meant to secure safe passage through the underworld's perils. You remember the sacred words, the gentle music of ritual drums, the flickering light of oil lamps, illuminating faces drawn with grief and hope. But for you, this passage is denied. You are cast beyond the reach of divine favor, your name whispered only in accusation and pity. This spiritual exile is a torment deeper than any physical punishment, a void where the promise of peace is withheld. Days pass in a blur beneath the relentless sun, each moment blending into the next with the sameness of endless labor and dust. The pyramid rises in the distance, sharp and silent, a testament to divine will and human sacrifice, but also to countless stories like yours forgotten and unrecorded. From this pit, you watch the sacred monument with a mixture of awe and sorrow, its stones carved with the hopes and fears of generations long past. The sacred texts echo in your mind the book of the dead spells, the protective powers of amulets, the solar boats ferrying souls safely through darkness. These fragments of faith offer a faint thread to cling to amid the crushing reality of your banishment. As the heat of day fades and evening shadows stretch across the lime-strewn earth, you gather near a flickering fire, its warmth a small comfort in the encroaching cold. Around you, the faces of the exiled are illuminated, etched with hardship, but unbowed in spirit, holding fast to whatever hope remains. A distant lullaby drifts softly on the night breeze, sung by a child whose voice weaves through the stillness like a fragile thread of peace. You close your eyes and listen, letting the melody soothe your weary mind and ease the harsh edges of grief and exile. The pyramid stands sentinel above, eternal and indifferent, a silent witness to suffering and endurance alike. Within the lime pit, life clings stubbornly to the edges of despair. Secret markings etched on dusty walls tell stories of resistance and remembrance, a language shared only by those who have been cast out. Quiet smiles exchanged across the harsh landscape, small acts of kindness and defiance create a fragile network of humanity amid desolation. Though denied the rights, the honor, and the dignity once promised, you remain a thread woven into the vast tapestry of the pyramid's history, bearing witness to the human cost beneath the grandeur, the unyielding endurance of those who labor and suffer in silence. The days in the lime pit unfold like an unending desert horizon, stretching out with a monotonous sameness that blurs the passage of time. Each morning begins with the same harsh glare of sunlight piercing the thin canvas of your shelter, a reminder that respite is rare and fleeting here. The heat seeps into your bones, a slow-burning weight that saps energy and will alike, while the ever-present dust settles like a ghostly veil over your skin and clothes. The air is thick with the scent of limestone and dry earth, mingled with the faint temps of sweat and the subdued murmurs of men resigned to their fate. You labor beneath the relentless sky, your hands moving with practiced but weary motions as you stir heaps of powdery lime. The dust rises in swirling clouds, clinging stubbornly to your face, filling your nostrils and throat with each breath, a constant irritant that seems to erode not just your body, but your very spirit. The overseers patrol with stern faces and sharp commands, their presence a constant reminder of the fragility of your position here. There is no room for rest, no chance for escape, only the grinding cycle of work that stretches endlessly from dawn until the sun slips beyond the horizon. In these moments of toil, your mind often drifts away from the harsh present to memories of your life before exile. You recall the rhythm of the workers' camp, the camaraderie that blossomed between men bound by shared hardship and purpose, the scent of bread baking in distant tents, the low murmur of conversations beneath the stars, the fleeting laughter that broke through the toil-like rays of light. These are ghosts that haunt the lime pit, offering fragile glimpses of a life you once knew. You imagine the cool shade of date palms, the gentle ripple of the Nile, and the sacred chants rising from temple altars far beyond your reach. The lime pit is a place of contrasts, where human resilience flickers amid harsh punishment. Though the overseers are unforgiving, moments of kindness and solidarity emerge quietly among the exiles. A shared cup of water passed silently between men, a brief word of encouragement whispered against the wind, or a gesture of support when exhaustion threatens to overwhelm. These small acts form an invisible thread that binds you to those who share your fate. In these connections, there is a faint warmth, a reminder that even in the coldest exile, the human spirit endures. At night, the camp settles into a hushed stillness, broken only by the crackling of fires and the soft breathing of weary men. The stars wheel silently overhead, distant and unchanging, their cold light a stark contrast to the flickering flames below. In this vast desert theater, you find moments to reflect on the sacred beliefs that once guided your people through life and death. The Book of the Dead, with its spells and prayers, promised protection and passage. The scarab amulet symbolized rebirth and transformation. Solar boats carried souls across the perilous waters of the underworld. These symbols now take on a new resonance, a fragile hope that sustains you amid the harshness of your exile. Though your body is condemned to the harsh labor of the lime pit, your mind seeks refuge in the stories and rituals passed down through generations. You recall the priests' chants, the rhythm of their prayers, the sacred geometry inscribed on temple walls. In your imagination, you journey beyond the dusty camp to temple sanctuaries adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, where incense smoke curls in delicate spirals and priests bathe in milk, chanting spells over golden chalices. These images are distant, but Vitola bridge between your present suffering and the eternal mysteries of life and death. The absence of burial rites weighs heavily not only on your spirit, but on your sense of identity. In your culture, the proper rites are not merely customs, but essential acts that ensure the soul's journey beyond the mortal world. Without them, you face the uncertainty of a restless afterlife, a shadowed limbo where peace is elusive. This spiritual exile compounds the physical hardships of the lime pit, creating a profound loneliness that no dust or stone can erase. Yet, even in this shadow, you cling to the hope that stories endure, that your name and your struggles will be remembered beyond the fading light. As weeks stretch into months, the lime pit becomes a harsh but familiar home. Your body grows toughened by relentless labor, your skin thickened and roughened by dust and sun. Yet the ache in your heart remains a silent echo of loss and longing. The distant silhouette of the pyramid continues to watch over you, a constant reminder of the grand design that required sacrifices like yours. Beneath its imposing shadow, countless others have endured, and countless stories remain etched in stone, waiting to be uncovered by those who seek to remember. In the quiet moments before sleep, the lullaby of the child's voice returns, weaving through the night air like a gentle thread of comfort. Its melody is simple but profound, a reminder that even amid hardship, the world holds moments of grace and beauty. You close your eyes, letting the song carry you toward rest, the vast sky above and the eternal pyramid beside you, guardians of secrets, both sorrowful and sacred. Though denied the rights and honors once promised, your story continues, woven into the fabric of history beneath the stones of the Great Pyramid. You are part of the silent witness to the cost of glory, the endurance of the human spirit, and the delicate hope that even in exile, peace may be found. The desert sun shines, as always, its heat unwavering as it rolls across the pale limestone quarries and the half-buried ruins, where time has softened edges and swallowed names. But beneath the still surface of this ancient ground, buried deep within the tombs, carved not for kings, but for common men, lie marks that speak in whispered tones. They are not the inscriptions of scribes or priests, nor the grand declarations of pharaohs etched in gold. No. These are the faint lines, scratched hastily into mud brick and stone, tucked into crevices, behind doorways, along unfinished corridors of the workers' necropolis. You wouldn't notice them unless you looked closely. You wouldn't hear them unless you listened with patience. Yet they are their scratches that hold the weight of quiet defiance, sardonic remarks, even wearied humor. They are the voices of those who built the tombs they would one day lie in, men denied grandeur but not agency, men who knew the cost of silence. Life for the pyramid workers was difficult beyond modern understanding, but their proximity to divinity building, the home of gods, and pharaohs offered a strange form of purpose. Even so, the truth remained that their world was dominated by control. Religious, social, political, all entwined. They were fed and housed and organized, their lives a steady rhythm of sunrise, labor, and sunset exhaustion, governed by overseers and oaths, bounded by the sacredness of their task. Yet, within this rigid structure, there were moments, small and fleeting, where a chisel's scratch or charcoal stroke became something more than function. Inside the workers' village at Deir el-Medina, Selid near Thebes, centuries later, yet akin in culture and rhythm, the tomb builders left marks, a drawing of a pharaoh with exaggerated ears, a hieratic scrawl mocking an overseer's orders, one name inscribed upside down, a quiet suggestion of reversal. These marks were private rebellions in public places, left in the knowledge that only those like them would ever see. Even in the earlier Old Kingdom periods, around the Great Pyramid's rise, similar clues whisper from the tombs at Giza's edges. Graffiti naming work crews with humorous titles. The drunkards of Menkaure, the friends of Khufu, show that these builders were not faceless slaves, but skilled workers, organized into teams with identities, rivalries, pride, and wit. In their tombs, unfinished surfaces bear doodles, a man chasing a goose, an ox with a comically long tail, phrases not sanctioned by priestly decree, but left in the quiet between shifts, when hands needed to move, but minds needed to breathe. These are not the sacred texts intended for eternity. They are the sighs, grumbles, and snickers of men who spent their lives beneath the sun, who saw the divine and responded with both reverence and irreverence. The graffiti is subtle in its tone, never loud, never dramatic. It does not call for rebellion in the open sense, but it hints at fatigue with power, at a bone-deep understanding of hierarchy's weight. A figure of an overseer with exaggerated belly and tiny head scrawled behind a storage room door. A sentence poking fun at a high official's elaborate titles. A crude poem written in jest about being buried in dust, not gold. In a society built on order and cosmic balance, even humor could be resistance. These inscriptions were made quietly, not to last, but by some irony of time and preservation, they remain, telling us more than official inscriptions ever could about the lived experience of those beneath the great monuments. They did not challenge the gods, but they murmured about the men who claimed to speak for them. These graffiti reveal the mental world of workers more intimately than statues or stele. They offer no dates, no lineage, no divine favor, only glimpses of boredom, camaraderie, and a weary kind of wisdom. One scratched image, discovered inside a narrow chamber, shows a worker reclining beneath a tree, rare indulgence in a culture that depicted labor more often than leisure. Another features what appears to be a set of tally marks beside a food basket, likely tracking rations. It's in the details here. 1 day's bread, there 2 days' silence. Beneath these strokes lie hunger, memory, and time, measured not in monuments, but in meals. These are the records of people who, though surrounded by eternity, lived profoundly in the moment. The physical act of marking these walls speaks volumes. It required tools, intention, and just enough risk to make the gesture meaningful. These were not careless scribbles, but decisions, moments when someone glanced over their shoulder, paused in the cool shade of the tomb, and etched something onto the wall, not for glory, but perhaps for relief. In a culture where everything was planned for the afterlife, these casual markings are surprisingly present, grounded in the here and now. They remind you that even under layers of belief and obedience, humanity persists in finding ways to say, I was here and I saw things differently. As the sun sinks behind the ruins, its light catching the faint scratches along crumbling tomb walls, you imagine the men who made them, their lives a blend of reverence and resignation. They rose each morning knowing their role, yet within that role they carved out tiny spaces of thought, of satire, of rebellion. No uprising came from the workers' tombs, no calls for justice or freedom, but still the marks remain. They are not silence, and they are not consent. They are something quieter, older, and perhaps more enduring. The dignity of expression in a world where words were rationed more tightly than grain. These marks also raise subtle questions about control. How tightly could the overseers truly grasp the hearts of those they ruled? If a man carves a mocking image of his superior inside a tomb wall, does that erode the overseer's legacy more surely than time itself? The ancient Egyptians understood the power of the image, of the word. They believed to name something was to give it life, and here, hidden in the crevices of the laborers' necropolis, names are mocked, orders reinterpreted, symbols subverted. A cat drawn with a pharaoh's crown, a bird meant to represent the soul, rendered with a broken wing. These small reversals matter not because they changed the world, but because they suggest an inner life unbroken by toil. Tomorrow the sun will rise again over the limestone plateau. More stone will be shaped, more dust will rise, more prayers will be spoken into the heat, asking the gods to protect, to bless, to guide. But somewhere behind a wall, in the worker's tomb no one visits, a figure will remain scratched in haste, smiling a crooked smile, wearing the crown of someone he likely never met. And in that image lies a truth, that those who built the kingdom of the dead were not themselves dead to humor, to frustration, or to the quiet rebellion of marking their presence in a world that might have preferred them invisible. In a civilization where order was sacred and hierarchy divine, the idea of dissent had to be subtle, nearly invisible, folded neatly into the daily rhythms of obedience and structure. You must imagine a world where nearly everything was ritual where gestures, words, and even meals followed prescribed paths handed down from generations. In such a world, rebellion could not be loud, it could not be banners or chants or open refusal. It had to be quiet, it had to be clever, It had to look like something else. This was the art of survival, of preserving the self in a society that asked for the dissolution of the individual into the grand machinery of kingship and cosmos. The graffiti carved into the limestone walls, or scratched hastily onto plaster, bear witness to this survival. Some are no more than a name perhaps repeated several times, scrawled with pride or perhaps desperation. A man marking his presence in a place where he knew he might otherwise be forgotten. Others are small images, drawn not to endure, but simply to express: a jackal with human legs, an ibis wearing a reed basket, a laborer reclining beneath a date palm that never grew near the worksite. These drawings were not part of funerary rites or divine worship. They were part of the internal lives of the laborers, the men who saw gods as distant and overseers as near. In these images is an irreverent intimacy, a closeness to the sacred that allows for play, for satire, for moments of saying, without saying, "We are here too." It is not just the content of the graffiti that matters, but where it appears, tucked into corridor walls, behind collapsed bricks, inside workers' tombs and storage chambers. These were not intended for open display. They were personal, private, and sometimes hidden entirely. Their placement reveals their purpose, not for posterity, but for expression. A message passed in secret to a future no one could have expected. The marks are small and unassuming, the work of a stolen moment, a quick scratch between tasks, made by hands that knew the risk and took it anyway. It was not revolution, but it was resistance, in the way that simply being oneself in a world that demands conformity is resistance. Sometimes the graffiti reads as bitterness, other times as humor. One drawing, found tucked inside the tomb shaft of a stonemason, shows a nobleman being chased by a donkey, crude reversal of status that might have drawn laughter among the workers if they had seen it. Another is a simple depiction of a man holding an oversized hammer, its proportions absurd and exaggerated, perhaps mocking the very tools they used each day or the grandiosity of the work expected of them. The tone of these markings is not always angry. Often it is weary, sarcastic, wistful. They do not shout, they mutter, they sigh. They roll their eyes through chalk and lime and sand. And yet, in their quietness, they echo with power. These markings suggest a layer of thought beneath the surface, a mental world not fully dominated by the state or the temple. They tell us that those who built the tombs could still reflect on the absurdities of their work, the contradictions of a world where kings were buried in gold and builders in sand. They remind us that humor survives even in harsh places, and that laughter, when it comes, is not always celebration. It is sometimes the only tool left to those who must endure. There's something deeply human in that, something grounding. You see it in the uneven line of the figure's arm, or the slightly smudged character scratched just a little too fast. The flaws themselves are part of the message. This wasn't sanctioned. This wasn't rehearsed. This was real. The landscape around these tombs has changed over the centuries. Sand has swept through corridors and piled against stone doorways. Roofs have collapsed, inscriptions faded, names eroded. But still, some of the graffiti survives, protected by shade, by depth, by accident. Archaeologists discover them, not with fanfare, but with quiet astonishment. There, behind a fallen lintel, a charcoal scrawl. Here, beneath centuries of rubble, a scratched name and a comment about missing dinner. To the casual observer, they are barely noticeable. But to those who look closely, they speak volumes. They change the story of ancient Egypt from one of gods and kings to one of workers and their weary, enduring spirits. Scholars debate whether these markings were acts of rebellion or simply the idle musings of tired men. But perhaps this question misses the point. Whether intentional defiance or momentary catharsis, the effect is the same. A human voice breaking through the silence of centuries. A mark that says, even in dust and obscurity, I had thoughts. I felt things. I made this. In a world obsessed with permanence, these fleeting marks carry unexpected weight. They are impermanent expressions of permanent humanity. And in their informality, they are honest in a way that royal decrees rarely are. There is a kind of sacredness to these defacements in the religious sense, but in the fact that they preserve what official records ignore. They tell of sore backs, of missed meals, of overseers with tempers, of jokes shared under breath, of longing for wives and children far from the quarry face. In some graffiti, there is a name alone, no message, no drawing, just the careful writing of a single identity. Perhaps the only time that man's name was ever recorded, not in temple, not in scroll, but here, in the worker's tomb. That small act of writing oneself into being is rebellion too, against anonymity, against erasure, against the machinery of empire that preferred your labor to your memory. It's worth remembering that many of these tombs were not intended for grand display. Workers built their own resting places quietly, often without permission, carving niches into the hillsides or behind the sites where they labored. The state allowed it sometimes, turned a blind eye other times, but within those tombs, meant for their families, for modest burials, for hope, they recorded not only prayers and offerings, but fragments of themselves. Graffiti wasn't just found in work tunnels or communal spaces. It was found inside the places they hoped to spend eternity. A drawing of a house, a list of tools, a depiction of a festival. Perhaps they hoped the gods would understand. Perhaps they hoped future eyes would see and know they had lived. As night falls over the desert, and the pyramid silhouettes against a sky gone deep with indigo, the workers' tombs sit in shadow, their entrances barely distinguishable from the rocks around them. But if you stepped close enough, you lit a small torch and ducked your head beneath the low ceiling, you might see them, the marks, the scratches, the lines and curves, made not by command, but by choice. They are faded now, worn by time, but still legible if you are patient. And when you read them, you are not alone. For a moment, you stand beside the man who carved them. You see through his eyes, even if dimly, and you understand that history is not only made by the powerful, but by the tired, the quiet, the unnoticed, the ones who found a way to speak in silence. The stillness of the desert is deceptive. Beneath the vast sweep of sand and stone, beneath the tombs and temples and sun-scoured monuments, lies an invisible world far more intricate than any structure raised in stone. It is a world of beliefs so deep-rooted, so carefully cultivated, that they shaped every aspect of life and death for those who lived beneath the pharaoh's sun. To live as an ancient Egyptian was to exist in a cosmos charged with meaning. Every sunrise was a battle won, every harvest a pact fulfilled. And at the heart of this worldview was not fear, but preparation for death. Yes, but more than that, for the afterlife, for a continuation of the self that required as much attention as any earthly endeavor. Even the lowest laborers, those who lifted stones and hauled lime and stood beneath whips held tightly to beliefs about what came next. They may not have possessed scrolls of papyrus adorned in vibrant color, or richly painted tomb walls glowing with depictions of paradise. But they knew the stories. They had heard the spells recited by priests, whispered versions passed down around fires and resting mats. They had seen the scarabs, the amulets, the painted coffins and funerary masks of the wealthier dead. And they believed, sometimes fiercely, sometimes quietly, that the soul did not simply end. That death was a door heavy, yes, but openable with the right words, the right charms, the right name, carried into the right ear of the gods. The Book of the Dead, or rather, what we now call that collection of spells and prayers, was never a single book in the modern sense. It was a shifting compilation, evolving over centuries, composed of protective incantations, instructions for the soul, and hymns meant to guide one through the perilous landscape of the Duatha realm of the dead. It described monsters, guardians, and rivers of fire, but also golden fields of grain, heavenly boats, and reunions with loved ones lost. To possess even a few lines from this sacred text was to own a kind of armor not against death itself, but against the oblivion that might come if one were unprepared. The workers who built tombs for nobles and kings often absorbed these beliefs through proximity. While carving burial chambers and painting sacred images, they absorbed the symbolism, internalized the logic. They watched priests perform purification rituals. They listened to the chants rising from within stone corridors. Some even dared to replicate these rites in their own humble graves, borrowing spells or symbols, drawing them in charcoal instead of paint, scratching them into limestone instead of laying them in gold. These gestures spoke of longing for order, for meaning, for protection. They believed that if the right words were spoken, if the right symbols were held close, then their souls, too, might cross the threshold and journey into eternal peace. Among the most beloved and widely recognized symbols was the scarab, a simple beetle, its rounded back and folded wings replicated in stone, faience, or bronze, sometimes barely larger than a fingertip, yet burdened with extraordinary significance. The scarab was associated with Khepri, the sun god who rolled the orb of morning across the sky, just as the dung beetle pushed its ball of earth. It symbolized renewal, rebirth, the daily miracle of light returning after darkness. To wear a scarab wether on a cord around the neck or sewn into a shroud was to claim that same promise, that after darkness there would be dawn. Even the poor found ways to craft scarabs, shaping them from clay or soft limestone, pressing them into cloth, hiding them in folds of linen before burial. Then there were the solar boats, great curved vessels carved into tomb walls or buried near royal crypts. Their purpose, not earthly but divine. They carried the sun god Ra through the heavens by day and through the underworld by night. They were protection against chaos, against the serpent Apophis, who sought to devour the sun and plunge the world into eternal shadow. For the Egyptians, especially those who labored under the sun's glare each day, this idea held immense weight, that their suffering was not in vain, that the very cycle of light and darkness mirrored a greater journey, one they could participate in if their soul was properly guided. For those without means, the solar boat became metaphor. They imagined their souls boarding these vessels upon death, carried safely across the celestial river, defended by gods and protected by magic. Sometimes, even their tombs were carved in the shape of boats' elongated chambers, curving gently at either end. In these small symbolic acts, they claimed space in a cosmic journey that otherwise belonged to kings. This was not hubris, it was hope wrapped in ritual. It was belief made humble. Amulets played a central role in that belief. They were not decorations, but tools, each with a precise function. The ankh for life, the jed pillar for stability, the tayet not for protection, the eye of Horus to ward off evil. These were worn in life and wrapped into bandages in death. Even the poorest among the dead might receive a simple clay charm slipped into their burial by family or friend. For many, these were the only things they took with them to the graves, small objects imbued with immense purpose. To hold one was to carry part of a sacred system, to whisper to the gods, even without voice. All of these objects, books, amulets, boats, were more than superstition. They were attempts to grasp the infinite, to secure some measure of control over what could not be seen. In a world shaped by drought, flood, disease, and empire, the promise of eternity and the tools to navigate it were as important as bread and water. And so belief was not confined to temples. It flowed outward into homes and tombs, onto walls and into whispers. It lived in the mind of the man who carved a scarab into the base of his workbench, in the woman who murmured a protection spell over her child's bed, in the elder who taught stories of the sun's nightly battle against darkness. As twilight stretched across the sands and stars emerged one by one above the darkened pyramid, these beliefs did not vanish with the sun. They lingered in firelight, in the hush of prayer, in the final breaths of those who passed into the realm of the dead. For the builders of tombs and monuments, for the men and women who bent beneath the weight of stone and duty, these beliefs were not abstract philosophy. They were comfort, they were resistance, they were survival. The deeper you sink into the spiritual imagination of ancient Egypt, the more you realize how central belief was not just for kings and priests, but for those who carried the stones, who ground the pigments, who stitched linen and carved beams. Their world was saturated with unseen forces, and the soul, or Ka, was never simply an abstract idea. It was as tangible as one's own hands, as real as the tools beside a work mat. From the first breath to the final rites, the Egyptians prepared for transition, not an end, but a departure to a realm that mirrored this one in its terrain and danger, beauty and judgment. To the modern eye, it might appear obsessive, the way they arranged objects, planned rituals, and rehearsed for death, but to them it was prudent, it was necessary. Death, in their view, was not a fall into darkness, but an entry into complexity. And within that complexity, the Book of the Dead served not merely as a guide, but as a companion. Each spell within it, whether protecting the soul from snakes in the underworld, enabling it to pass through specific gates, or ensuring it could speak its own name before Osiris was carefully selected, adapted, and arranged. While royalty and high officials could afford elaborate scrolls, inked in vivid hues and lined with careful script, more modest individuals improvised. Some scratched a favored passage onto the wall beside their bed. Others recited the spells from memory, taught by a relative, or learned from listening to temple chants carried on the wind. And still others buried with them a sherd of pottery bearing a single line, a plea for safe passage, a fragment of prayer that served as a kind of spiritual passport. For the pyramid workers, whose hands shaped eternity in stone, but whose own bones were destined for modest graves, the spiritual tools available had to be light, portable, and enduring. A small amulet worn under the tunic, a line of hieratic text folded into linen and placed beneath the tongue, a single carved scarab with a name and a symbol on its back. In these small acts, there was faith, but there was also ingenuity, deeply practical spirituality that adapted grand rituals to modest lives. They could not afford the golden coffins or the elaborate burial chambers of the elite, but they believed in the same river the soul would cross, in the same sun that would rise again, in the same need to arrive before the gods, not as a stranger, but as someone expected, someone prepared. And preparation meant purification. Bathing was not only for hygiene, but for ritual cleansing, removing the invisible residue of impurity, of contact with the mundane world, of moral and spiritual failure. Even in workers' camps, where water was scarce and privacy rarer still, there were moments set aside to wash one's hands in a bowl, to wipe one's face before reciting a prayer, to face the rising sun and speak words of alignment. It was not elaborate, but it was earnest. In this, they echoed the priests who bathed in sacred pools 4 times a day, but on a humbler scale. They were not calling down the gods. They were simply making themselves ready. The solar boats that carried RA through the underworld, each night guarded by deities, beset by serpents, trailed by jackals and crocodiles, were carved with exquisite detail into the tombs of the wealthy. Yet even among the lowborn, the concept of journey and vessel remained strong. In some workers' tombs, we find curved lines etched faintly into the plaster, echoing the hull of a boat. In others, a model boat has been placed among the funerary offerings, simple, made from mud or shaped wood, but still unmistakable in its form. These were not just symbolic, they were meant to be used. The deceased was expected to board this boat, to join Ra's crew, to fight off darkness alongside the sun god, and emerge victorious each morning with the dawn. Even for the humblest soul, there was a place in the boat if the proper protections were taken. And what were those protections? Words, names, tokens. The ancient Egyptians placed extraordinary emphasis on the power of naming both others and oneself. A name preserved was a life extended. A name erased was a soul condemned to oblivion. To inscribe a name on a tomb wall, on a shroud, on a scarab, was to weave it into the eternal. Even workers, whose identities might be lost to time in census lists or ration logs, sometimes ensured their names appeared, carved beneath a favorite symbol, hidden inside a stone niche, scratched onto the underside of a door lintel. Well, they might not have owned land or held titles, but they understood the permanence of words. They knew that to be forgotten was the true death. The scarab, which seemed to roll the sun across the sky each morning, became a personal companion in death. It often served as a heart scarab, placed over the heart to speak in the soul's defense during the final judgment before Osiris. "Do not stand against me as a witness," it would say. "Do not weigh my heart falsely." In this judgment scene, the heart was measured against the feather of Mat, truth, balance, harmony. If heavier, the soul would be devoured by a fearsome beast. If balanced, it would continue on. The scarab was both witness and ally, ensuring the dead could speak clearly, confidently, truthfully. It was not simply a symbol. It was a legal defense, a final companion in a courtroom of gods. Even those who had little access to formal burial rites often found ways to simulate this defense. A clay figure holding a reed, a few words inked with soot onto a band of cloth, a chant murmured by those who wrapped the body. These acts, quiet and private, carried immense weight. They aligned the soul with cosmic justice. They restored dignity where none had been given in life. The belief in Mata principle, more expansive than any modern idea of justice infused every part of the ancient Egyptian worldview. It wasn't just about truth-telling or fairness. Mat meant living in harmony with the order of the universe, doing your work, respecting your neighbors, honoring the gods, providing for your family, and accepting your place. For the pyramid builders, this belief was both comfort and constraint. Their suffering could be interpreted as a contribution to the great order. But even so, in their graffiti, their rituals, and their symbols, we see that they also longed for personal justice, for recognition, for peace. The tomb, then, even in its humblest form, became a site where these beliefs converged. It was not merely a grave, it was a platform, a stage for the final performance of the soul. The walls were not blank, they were invitations. Every object placed inside, every symbol carved or painted, every word written had purpose: to shield, to guide, to speak. These were not elaborate productions for show, but thoughtful arrangements meant to endure beyond the physical body. For if the tomb remained intact, if the name was remembered, if the soul passed its trials, then death became not a loss, but a transition, a continuation. As the moon rises over the desert, casting long silver shadows across the half-buried ruins, you can almost hear the whisper-soft voices reciting verses from memory, fingers tracing symbols worn smooth by time. The pyramid looms as a monument to divine kingship, yes, but surrounding it are quieter structures, smaller tombs dug into the rock, often overlooked. Here lie the ones who labored beneath the sun, who built the paths to eternity for others while preparing their own. Their beliefs were not ornamental, they were woven into the grain of their lives. In every gesture, every carving, every word, there was hope, not always for reward, but for rest, for protection, for the chance to wake beneath the stars and find oneself whole again. As you drift away from the dusty encampments of the pyramid laborers, the scent of sweat and stone gives way to something more: rarefied powdered myrrh suspended in the air, the faint perfume of crushed lotus petals stirred into warm oils, the clean sting of incense rising in practiced curls through high stone corridors. It is quieter here, not because there is no sound, but because the silence is curated, sacred. This is the domain of the priesthood, the unseen hands who care for the divine, who bathe the gods, dress them, feed them, wake them in the morning, and sing them to sleep each night. And it is in these rituals, these performances, wrapped in velvet and gold, that the contrast between the haves and the have-nots of ancient Egypt becomes most visible. To be a priest in the service of the great temples was not merely an occupation. It was a way of life regulated by celestial order and ritual purity. Their duties reached far beyond spiritual guidance. They were administrators, astronomers, physicians, scribes. They advised pharaohs, held sway over vast temple lands, and controlled stores of grain, linen, and wealth that rivaled entire provinces. But amid these political roles, the heart of their work lay in ceremonial, carefully timed, carefully choreographed rituals that sought not only to honor the gods, but to maintain the balance of the universe itself. Inside the towering hypostyle halls of Karnak, or the secluded sanctuary rooms of Memphis, the days began in the dark. Torches were lit before dawn, not to chase away night, but to invite presence. The god whose statue resided in the innermost chamber had been asleep. It was the priest's duty to wake him, but one did not enter the presence of a god casually. Purity was paramount. A high priest would have undergone cleansing multiple baths in cold water taken before the sun rose, his body shaved of all hair, his clothing white and unblemished. In more elaborate rites, milk believed to be both nourishing and purifying was used to wash the skin, softening the body into a vessel of reverence. Whether literal or symbolic, this cleansing served to sever the human from the mundane. Only then could he approach the divine. Imagine a stone room, barely wide enough to turn around in, lit by a single flickering lamp. Before the priest, a statue sits hidden in a Nyasa shrine cabinet, closed during the night. The doors are opened with specific words. Each gesture is measured. A greeting is spoken. The god is offered food, bread, beer, figs, and sometimes wine. The food is not eaten, it absorbs the essence of the offering, the life force. The priest chants hymns while lighting sacred incense, wafting it toward the idol. The god is dressed in fine linens, jewelry, sometimes even a small collar of fresh-cut flowers. This is not metaphor. This is real. Every day, the deity must be attended like royalty. Only after the god has been fed, cleaned, and dressed does the day begin. Golden chalices line the temple shelves, their surfaces hammered smooth by skilled artisans, reflecting the lamplight in warm, liquid gleam. Each vessel has a purpose, one for the offering of water, another for wine, another for milk mixed with honey. Some hold natron for cleansing, others hold oils blended with resins and herbs, ground in perfect ratios. The priest speaks spells over these vessels, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a steady, rhythmic chant. Each syllable is an invocation, each word an act of maintenance for the divine order. Without these chants, the gods might grow restless, the sun might falter, the Nile might not rise. These rituals existed far from the blistered hands and cracked feet of the pyramid workers. Here, the pace was slow by design, movements unhurried, the air cool and still. It was a different world, one of deep cushions and perfumed halls, of golden thrones placed before empty chairs where the gods were invited to sit. Priests did not toil in fields. Their fingers were calloused not by rope, but by scrolls. Their days passed not in sunstroke and shouting, but in formulas and fragrance, shielded from the chaos of the outer world. And yet, for all the contrast, these rituals were not selfish indulgence. In the minds of those who performed them, they were essential acts, every bit as necessary to the state's survival as the stones placed by the workers at Giza. The garments worn in temple service told their own story. Linen, pure and white, symbolized cleanliness and divine favor. The robes were often pleated into fine ridges, starched with natron, and scented lightly with pressed flowers. Over time, different levels of priests developed dress codes. Some wore leopard skins over the shoulder in mimicry of gods. Others adorned themselves with collars of turquoise and carnelian, arranged in strict symbolic order. The sound of these garments, as the priests walked, was soft rustling, a whisper in stone corridors that added to the sanctity of the moment. But beneath the silk of the ritual was something more profound, a deep, almost obsessive need to preserve order. The universe was fragile. Chaos, personified in myths as serpents and sandstorms and betrayal, always threatened to unravel it. It was the task of the priesthood to hold that chaos at bay, not through war or proclamation, but through quiet, daily ceremony. In offering bread to the god, they believed they ensured the crops would grow. In lighting incense, they defended the land from plague. In reciting a list of sacred names, they reinforced the walls of the world. Every action echoed across the spiritual and physical realms. The offerings made were symbolic. but their preparation was real. Entire temple staff were employed to bake the sacred loaves, brew the ceremonial beers, and press the oils from harvested nuts and herbs. This was a closed economy of devotion, humming quietly behind stone walls, while the city outside moved to its own rhythms. The gods were fed, not to appease them, as in some other cultures, but to sustain the reciprocal bond between heaven and earth. What was offered to the divine was believed to be returned to the people in the form of stability, health, and seasonal harmony. And yet, not every priest lived in opulence. There were hierarchies within the temple, as in all places. High priests controlled vast influence and lands, while lower-ranking officials performed the more mundane tasks, sweeping altars, restocking supplies, maintaining order. Some priests were appointed only seasonally, others came from hereditary lines. For some, it was a lifetime's calling, for others, a brief proximity to holiness. But all were bound by the same rules of purity, the same script of ritual. Even the lowest assistant knew the order of prayers, the placement of vessels, the tone of sacred words. Outside, the sun would rise as it always did, gilding the temple walls and bathing the courtyards in honey-colored light. But inside, among velvet curtains and carved reliefs, the atmosphere remained cool, measured, timeless. The rituals unfolded, not according to personal will, but according to a script written in the stars. To be a priest was to disappear into duty, not as a loss of self, but as a fulfillment of role. They became instruments of cosmic balance, their voices tuned to harmony, their hands extensions of divine service. To witness it, you must imagine yourself standing quietly at the threshold of that temple room, unseen, unnoticed. The air is heavy with the scent of burning cedar and melting resin. A chant echoes, slow and deep, from a voice that has practiced these words since youth. A golden chalice is lifted and tilted gently over a bowl. A strip of linen is folded and laid over a small idol with the care of one dressing a sleeping child. Nothing is hurried, nothing improvised. Every movement is a thread in the tapestry of eternity, and in that soft cadence, in that golden light filtered through lattice and smoke, you begin to understand that for all the brutality of Egypt's great monuments, for all the backs broken to raise stone to sky, there existed, in tandem, a devotion so precise and reverent that it served as the spiritual mirror to that labor. If the workers built the body of eternity, then the priests breathed its soul. To those who lived beyond the sandstone temple walls, who carried mud, bricks, and swung mallets under the sun, the priestly world may have seemed like a dream, more perhaps a quiet frustration. The same gods to whom they offered short, desperate prayers were attended within the temple by men in spotless robes, who poured milk into gold and spoke not in pleas, but in commands. There was awe, yes, and reverence, but there was also distance. The temple rituals were performed in hushed sanctuaries. Few would ever enter, their meaning preserved in scrolls few could read. But somehow, this separation did not weaken belief. It strengthened mystery. And mystery, as it often does, fed both devotion and imagination. The space of the temple itself was carefully arranged to reinforce this divine distance. As one moved from the outer courtyard inward, ceilings dropped lower, rooms grew darker, air heavier, the walls closed in with silence, each chamber more secret than the last, until the final sanctuary windowless, small, lit by flickering oil and the polished reflection of gold. Only the highest priests, initiated and cleansed, could cross into this inner sanctum. Even pharaohs, whose names were spoken with reverence across the land, rarely entered. Here, divinity dwelled not in thunder or flame, but in stillness, and that stillness was maintained with almost obsessive care. The priests moved within it like shadows, familiar with the sacred geometry of the space. Every object had its place. Ritual tools were arranged precisely on altars, spoons carved of ivory, blades of obsidian for cutting ritual bread, platters of electrum engraved with tiny figures mid-prayer. Chalices were covered when not in use, protected from dust, from corruption, even from stray glances. Some were shaped like lotus blossoms, their petals flared and etched with words of protection. Others resembled miniature boats, floating quietly upon altars as if already navigating the celestial waters. In their rituals, the priests spoke to gods directly. The hymns they chanted were not requests, they were affirmations. You rise, O Great One, and the sky sings your name. You awaken, O Golden Child, and the earth grows full. Their voices moved not like speech, but like music monotone and slow syllables stretched until meaning dissolved into rhythm. These incantations were not entertainment, they were function. The spoken word had power. It was through utterance that the world had been created, and through repetition that it was sustained. And so the priests spoke not to be heard, but to ensure the cycle continued. Even the timing of the rituals followed the rhythms of the cosmos. There were morning rites to greet the sun, noon prayers as Ra reached his zenith, and sunset ceremonies to prepare for his descent. At night, offerings were made to the moon and stars, two jackal-headed guides and lion-faced guardians of the dark. Within the temple walls, time moved differently, not measured by hour or labor, but by celestial alignment. Priests trained as astronomers tracked the stars, not for curiosity, but to time the rituals. If the stars were wrong, if the moon was obscured, a ceremony might be delayed. Cosmic order took precedence. And yet, for all its precision, the work of the priest was not cold. It was intimate. In dressing the statue of a god, the priest reenacted a relationship of care. He folded linen with attention, anointed carved limbs with fragrant oil, whispered familiar words. The statue, often no taller than a man's waist, was more than wood or stone. It was a vessel. Through it, the divine watched and listened. To tend, it was to engage in a living relationship, one that required humility, discipline, and deep emotional reserve. At times, more elaborate rituals took place, festivals, during which the gods were paraded outside the temples, borne on golden barks, shaded by ostrich feather fans. The high priests, accompanied by attendants and musicians, moved through the streets, their processions slow and somber. Crowds gathered, incense was burned, petals scattered. But such moments were rare. For most days, the gods remained inside, and the priests, like caretakers of something fragile and immense, kept their vigil in the half-light of the sacred halls. The contrast between these velvet-shrouded spaces and the rest of Egypt was stark. In the workers' camps, meals were taken hastily: flatbread, onion, a handful of dried fish. In the temples, offerings were displayed in symmetrical rows, fruit polished to a shine, loaves arranged by size and type, jars sealed with wax and labeled in careful script. These offerings were never consumed by the god, of course. After ritual transformation, they were often redistributed among the temple staff, or sometimes given to the poor. Still, the symbolism mattered. Presentation mattered. Each item stood in for abundance, for care, for gratitude. Even the air inside these sanctuaries was curated. Cedar, myrrh, juniper, and cinnamon were ground into powder and burned at set intervals. The smoke cleansed and consecrated. It did not choke, it floated, softening outlines, gilding surfaces in faint silver mist. This was not accidental. Smell was sacred. Fragrance attracted the divine. It soothed, invited, sanctified. A god would not dwell where the air was sour. And so, every breath taken inside the temple became part of the offering. To be a priest was to live in tension human, but expected to act divine. Their lives were heavily restricted. Sexual abstinence, fasting, periods of isolation, strict cleanliness. They did not simply perform the rituals, they embodied them. And in doing so, they removed themselves slowly from ordinary experience. Some priests, especially those stationed in desert temples or far-flung shrines, lived like monks. They spoke little, saw few. Their minds turned inward, toward symbol, toward silence. And yet they were not cut off entirely. When a child fell ill, a family might send word to a temple priest to write a protective amulet or speak a healing spell. When crops failed, when dreams disturbed, when ancestors did not answer, it was the priests who mediated. Their knowledge of ritual and remedy, of divine language and cosmic law, made them essential not just for the state, but for the ordinary people whose lives were shaped by the unseen. In one preserved papyrus, a priest carefully transcribes a healing incantation, a spell to cool fever, to calm shaking limbs. It calls not only on gods, but on elements, wind, water, the stillness of night. This blend of religion and medicine was not contradictory. To the Egyptians, illness was spiritual and physical. Healing required words as well as herbs. The priest's role extended far beyond the temple altar. He was a bridge between God and man, between life and afterlife, between order and chaos. And so, as the day ends, the temple does not sleep. Lamps remain lit in the innermost rooms. Night prayers continue, whispered not for audiences, but for the eternal. A young priest, his hair freshly shaved, kneels in the dark, reciting a hymn he learned as a child. His hands do not tremble. He moves with care, folding linen over the small gold figure before him, adjusting its tiny headdress with the same reverence a mother might show her sleeping child. Above, the sky shifts. The stars wheel slowly, unnoticed by most. But he notices. He counts them silently, tracks their rise and fall. The gods move among them, he knows, not in metaphor, but in real, radiant form. His work is not to call them down. It is to ensure they remain where they belong, balanced, bright, ever turning. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into the shadowed halls of power, where stone pillars rise like silent sentinels, and the air hums faintly with whispered counsel. Here, away from the glaring sun and the toiling masses of the pyramid builders, the true pulse of ancient Egypt beats in measured, deliberate rhythms. It is a world of silk and gold, yes, but also of strategy and secrecy, where the fate of kingdoms hangs not on the might of armies, but on words spoken in chambers, closed to all but the closest confidants. The palace is a theater of subtlety, where alliances are forged and broken over shared meals, where marriage is currency and loyalty a shifting tide. At the heart of this political web stands the vizier, the pharaoh's chief advisor, and the steward of Egypt's vast bureaucracy. The vizier holds responsibilities that span the breadth of the realm, overseeing tax collection, supervising irrigation projects, managing the legal system, and commanding the archives of the state. Yet, above all, the vizier is the master of court politics, the one who navigates the perilous waters between pharaoh and nobles, priests and generals. It is he who arranges marriages, not only to secure alliances within the royal family, but also to placate powerful families whose support is vital. Dynastic marriage is not merely a matter of affection. It is the linchpin of stability. Picture a chamber illuminated by the flicker of oil lamps, their soft glow casting elongated shadows on the intricate frescoes adorning the walls. Around a low table, officials gather robes of fine linen, brushing softly against polished stone floors. Their voices are low, careful, the cadence measured not by haste but by necessity, each word chosen to conceal as much as to reveal. Over vessels filled with sweet wine, the vizier unfolds plans to marry the pharaoh's daughter to the son of a powerful Namarktha provincial governor, thus securing loyalty from Upper Egypt's most influential region. The negotiations are delicate. A single misstep could ignite rivalry, breeding unrest where peace is desired. Meanwhile, the pharaoh himself, cloaked in linen, dyed the color of lapis lazuli, and adorned with collars of gold and turquoise, moves through the rituals of kingship with a measured solemnity. His lips murmur prayers to the gods, his hands lifted in ritual gestures meant to invoke protection and favor. The crown upon his head is not merely a symbol of power, but a weight of divine responsibility. His words, though softly spoken, carry the echoes of millennia, linking him to the gods who fashioned the world from chaos. Yet behind the veneer of divine majesty, the pharaoh is often caught in a web of competing influences. His role is partly ceremonial living god, whose presence alone upholds Mat, the cosmic order. But real governance often falls to those around him, the viziers, the generals, the temple priests, each wielding their own power. Sometimes the pharaoh's voice is drowned in the din of counsel and intrigue, his wishes interpreted or redirected, his prayers whispered as he stands before statues of Amun-Ra or Ptah are both personal and political, seeking the gods' guidance in a world where human scheming is ever present. In the palace corridors, courtiers whisper of intrigue and succession. Who will inherit the throne? Which wife will bear the next heir? These questions are never far from conversation. Dynastic marriage is a chess game. Alliances through marriage not only consolidate power, but also neutralize threats. A daughter married into a rival family becomes a living guarantee of peace. But such arrangements are fragile. A single word or gesture can unravel years of careful diplomacy. Consider the role of the Queen Mother, often a formidable figure in her own right. She watches closely as her son ascends the throne, advising him, shaping his court, placing loyalists in key positions. Her ambitions are subtle but fierce, aiming to secure her family's legacy for generations to come. She attends religious festivals draped in gold, standing beside the pharaoh as he offers tribute to the gods. Her presence, a reminder that power is both spiritual and familial. The vizier's schemes unfold within this complex tapestry. He must balance the needs of the pharaoh with the demands of nobility and priesthood, negotiate with foreign envoys, and oversee monumental building projects, while guarding his own position. A rival's whisper can be fatal. Politics is a dance of shadows, where trust is rare and betrayal common. The vizier's every move is calculated, each alliance tested for durability. In the background, temple priests maintain their vigil, reminding all that divine favor underpins earthly rule. They hold secrets of ritual and prophecy, their chants echoing through sacred halls. Their approval can legitimize a king or cast doubt upon him. Thus, the interplay between secular and sacred authority shapes every decision, every marriage contract, every law passed. The palace is not merely a place of power. It is a living organism, pulsing with ambition, fear, hope, and tradition. Portraits carved into stone tell stories of victories and piety. But behind those faces lie human struggles, rivalries over influence, quiet prayers for favor, moments of doubt hidden beneath golden masks. The pharaoh's voice may be soft, but the weight of his presence resonates through every stone and every whispered promise. As evening falls, the palace settles into a muted hush. Lanterns glow faintly, servants move silently through chambers, and the vizier pens letters to distant governors, weaving networks of loyalty. The pharaoh retires to his private quarters, perhaps to gaze through latticed windows at the stars, seeking counsel from the heavens. The gods remain near, their presence felt in the smallest detail, the alignment of pillars, the placement of statues, the flow of sacred water in stone basins. And so the cycle continues. Plans made and remade, alliances forged and broken, prayers whispered and rituals performed. It is a world apart from the harsh toil of the pyramid builders, yet inextricably linked. For without the order upheld within these walls, without the marriages arranged and the laws enforced, the great monuments and sacred rites would crumble into dust and forgetfulness. As the night deepens over the palace, the soft flicker of oil lamps casts a golden glow on polished floors, and shadows lengthen along the walls. The weight of unseen conversations grows heavier, behind closed doors, away from the curious eyes of attendants and servants. The great game of power continues with quiet intensity. The vizier, draped in robes, embroidered with symbols of authority, pores over documents etched in ink and papyrus, his mind calculating the ripples that each decision will send across the land. His fingers trace the names of nobles and governors, allies and rivals alike, as he considers the intricate dance of loyalty and ambition. Each marriage proposal, each alliance, sealed with a gift or favor, is a thread woven into the delicate tapestry of Egypt's future. These political maneuvers were far from mere formalities. They were lifelines that preserved the kingdom's stability amid a world of shifting allegiances and external threats. The vizier's hand-guided marriages that linked powerful families, often bridging regions that otherwise might compete for resources or influence. Such unions were both personal and political, meant to bind men and women, but also clans and provinces, into a cohesive whole. The pharaoh's bloodline was not simply a matter of heritage, but of statecraft. The royal family's connections reinforced the legitimacy of rule, quieting dissent and reinforcing the ideals of cosmic order. Yet beneath the grandeur and ceremony lurked tension. Rival factions jockeyed for influence. Ambitious nobles sought to elevate their own standing, weaving intrigue like threads through the corridors. The queen's favor, the position of heir, the distribution of land and titles, all these became points of contest. Some whispered that even the pharaoh was a figurehead at times, his will shaped by the currents of court politics and the counsel of those around him. His prayers to the gods, uttered softly in the stillness of the sanctuary, were as much a search for guidance as a performance of power. Consider the figure of the young prince, newly designated heir but inexperienced in the ways of court. His days are filled with lessons in diplomacy and history. His evenings with counsel from trusted advisors who teach him the delicate art of balancing ambition with caution. Around him, elders watch, some with hopeful eyes, others with veiled suspicion. The corridors echo with hushed warnings and whispered support. Every gesture, every word carries weight. The future of the kingdom rests upon his shoulders, even as he learns to bear it. The palace itself, with its labyrinth of rooms and courtyards, becomes a stage for this intricate drama. Banquets are held in grand halls, the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine mingling with the sound of lyres and flutes. Courtiers mingle in silks dyed the colors of the Nile, exchanging polite words that often veil sharper intent. Outside, guards patrol silently, their presence a reminder that power is always shadowed by danger. Assassination, exile, or sudden disgrace await those who falter. Thus, the dance of court life is one of constant vigilance as much as celebration. In the temples, priests continue their solemn duties, their chants weaving through the night air like threads binding heaven and earth. The pharaoh's role as both king and divine intermediary is reaffirmed in rituals where he offers homage to Amen, Ra, and Osiris, seeking their favor to legitimize his reign. These ceremonies blend theology with politics, reminding all that the throne is not merely a seat of power, but a sacred charge. The gods watch, and their judgment is as eternal as the stars. As dawn approaches, the palace quiets, but the schemes do not cease. The vizier retires to a secluded chamber to pen letters sealed with the royal insignia, messages dispatched to distant officials. Orders that will ripple through Egypt's vast territories. Couriers prepare to depart. Each decision made in these quiet hours will shape the lives of thousands: farmers planting crops, merchants trading along the Nile, soldiers stationed at distant borders. And so the cycle of power endures, ever turning like the great wheel of the sun. The pharaoh's whispered prayers, the vizier's strategic plans, the queen's subtle influence, all threads woven into the fabric of Egypt's enduring legacy. From the toil of the pyramid builders to the shimmer of golden chalices, from the chants of priests to the intrigues of the court, this ancient civilization balanced on the edge of order and chaos, divine favor and human ambition. In this delicate balance, there is a lesson for us today, a reminder of the fragility of power, the complexity of human relationships, and the quiet strength found in ritual and belief. As you let your mind wander through these halls of history, imagine the weight of responsibility carried by those who shaped the world, the hopes and fears wrapped in every gesture, every whispered word. And now, as night deepens outside your own window, with stars glimmering softly and the world slipping towards rest, allow yourself to release these ancient echoes. Let them fade gently, like the last notes of a distant song. Breathe in the calm, the stillness, the quiet dignity of a world both distant and deeply human. Tomorrow the sun will rise again, steady, sure, and full of promise. But for now, sleep softly, cradled in the timeless rhythm of history's gentle breath. As our journey through the sands of time comes to a quiet close, imagine yourself slowly withdrawing from the ancient world. You have visited a world of endless toil beneath the blazing sun, of golden rituals performed in shadowed temples, of whispered schemes in vast palaces that shaped the destiny of a civilization. You have walked among stone and sand, felt the weight of history in the labor-worn hands of builders, heard the steady chants of priests tending gods, and glimpsed the delicate balance of power held within the palace walls. Now, as the veil of night settles softly around you, take a deep, gentle breath and feel the rhythm of those distant lives fade peacefully into the background. The dust of the desert drifts away on a cooling breeze. The voices of kings and commoners alike dissolve into the calm stillness of a timeless evening. The stories you have heard are like soft echoes, lulling you toward rest, reminding you that even in worlds shaped by hardship and intrigue, there is beauty in endurance and grace in ceremony. Imagine the steady pulse of the Nile beneath a tranquil sky, the stars slowly wheeling overhead as they have for millennia. Their silent journey connects past and present, cradle and cosmos. Feel the comforting weight of this eternal rhythm, reminder that all things move in cycles, that after labor comes rest, and after the longest day comes the soothing embrace of night. Allow your mind to drift with the gentle flow of history's currents. Let the images of sun-warmed stone, shimmering gold, and quiet ritual fade softly, like distant lanterns dimming one by one. Rest now in the knowledge that the past is both a story and a sanctuary, a place where the complexities of life find their calm conclusion. As you settle deeper into sleep, carried by the quiet breath of time, may you find peace in the gentle unfolding of dreams. Tomorrow awaits with new light, new stories, and fresh promise. But for now, in this moment of calm, let your spirit rest, wrapped in the soothing embrace of history's lullaby. Good night.